Previously on Podcast Without Pretense.
Hey guys, have you heard of this NSFW show? It's like really good. I don't know why we're not watching that.
You know, I'm telling you that if we start a Patreon for this show, we'll have like $5 for a whole year.
I'm pretty sure Tuesday nights is really the key night to be live.
So you guys, sorry, Iyaz, go ahead.
So that was a really good episode last week.
It was a good episode. It really was. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I'm Jonathan Strickland.
I'm Iyaz Akhtar.
And I'm Eric Sandine.
So I was going to say, this actually reminds me of when we experimented over at How Stuff Works with a Tech Stuff live show, which we did, I think it was from 2 to 2:30, and we were really trying to keep it to 22 minutes. You know, we were doing like the whole television half hour in the United States episode kind of length. And me and my co-host at the time, Chris Paulette, would spend the days counting down to it, you know, putting all the stories together and making the show order and all this kind of stuff. And we did it for about maybe 3 or 4 months. And I think all the episodes are still available somewhere like on Justin TV or something. And I think at most we had about 27 people watching us live, and we weren't distributing it as like a podcast or anything. So that was a valuable lesson.
This is live only. There was no podcast.
It was a live show. It was us just experimenting with it. And it was something that we wanted to try and do for multiple reasons, but ultimately it wasn't a great fit because the How Stuff Works homepage wasn't designed to have some sort of like window in it that would only be active for a half hour out of the day and then disappear. You would have to manually go in and make all those changes if you wanted to feature it on the homepage. And if it wasn't featured on the homepage, it was much harder for people to find it. So it was, one of those things that it was more like kind of a proof of concept to see if we could pull something like that off. And while technically we could, like I said, it wasn't really a success.
So the show doesn't really have an outline or show topics, except when Jonathan Strickland put together a list of show topics for today.
Well, I mean, I only do it just so that we don't all get together and have nothing to say. We don't have to cover any of those things.
Very
we talk
eventful.
about whatever we like.
I mean, clearly that's what we talk about on this show, and I know that like Eric, he developed a really, really popular game, and then he quit that company to go to another one. That happened, right?
Yeah, that was my week. Yeah, mainly.
There.
Yeah, originally what I was going to say in the previously on Podcast Without Pretense is, guys, I mean, I just really liked BioShock Infinite, and I cannot wait to see what Irrational Games comes up with next. But perhaps it's too soon.
Yeah, so I saw that story. Is he the founder of the studio? The guy who left?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the original founder. He's
got a reputation for being challenging to work with because he has a reputation for having a game go into development and get really far along in development in multiple areas, like in basic art design, and then decide later, he's like, no, on second thought, I don't think it should look like that. I think it should look like this other way, which means that they'd have to scrap everything and rebuild. That happened at least once on BioShock Infinite, I know. So I know that there's been a lot of turnover at Irrational Games where people have left and gone to work at other game companies. Some of them have come back to Irrational Games, but I know that
was actually one of the kind of the cool things about what they're doing for all the people they're actually laying off was they're pretty much having a job fair for all of the people that he's laying off, which I think is pretty cool. Like that's actually pretty awesome. They're not just laying him off. They're trying to find him other places within Take-Two, and then even third-party companies are allowed to come in and have a job fair and interview. That's kind of awesome.
I know that on Twitter, I saw lots of different representatives from various game companies say, anyone at Irrational Games who's going to be in need of a job, feel free to go ahead and send us an application, because a lot of them were actually hiring. So that was also kind of cool to just see that go out on Twitter. I don't know how many of those messages actually made it to their intended destination, because that's kind of the nature of Twitter. If you're not looking at the right time, you could totally miss something. But it was still kind of, it was an interesting reaction.
The news didn't affect me whatsoever, since I don't play this game, nor do I plan on playing the games that this guy will make in the future. So,
BioShock and BioShock Infinite both were games that I enjoyed. I really liked the storytelling. I mean, BioShock Infinite, I had real problems with the third act. If you think of the traditional 3-act structure of a story, the third act for me really didn't hold up to the setup. But the art design and the world design and just kind of the overall concept of what was going on was pretty cool. So I actually really enjoyed them. I did think that they probably were very ambitious projects that were maybe a little too ambitious to be able to make it a smooth process of designing and building that game.
Yeah, I mean, BioShock Infinite was probably one of my favorite games that I played last year. So, but I'm interested to see. He wants to work with a small team on an indie game, so that could be interesting, or I guess quote unquote indie, since he's still going to be under Take-Two for that.
Yeah, and BioShock Infinite might have been my favorite game as far as writing goes last year, if it weren't for the fact that The Last of Us also came out last year, and I thought The Last of Us was better. I mean, it was just a better writing, more emotionally effective, and it didn't have like the end of The Last of Us, I felt was incredibly strong compared to the end of BioShock Infinite.
Now, why does Eric have like a foreshadowing element about the next story behind him? Like, how did he know we're going to be talking about ducks? Rubber ducks.
Yeah.
I went out and bought that just as I read the rundown. So
he definitely did not know, because I was the one who put that story in there. I was just looking around at various stories, and I saw this one about Wisconsin voting on legalizing rubber duck races. And it's such a non-story. I mean, we can't talk about this for more than like a minute or two anyway, but it just kind of cracked me up. So it's the sort of events you might see at like a fundraising event for a nonprofit, where they might have a little rubber ducky race, and you can buy, tickets or whatever to play this game. But technically in Wisconsin, it's illegal because it's considered a form of gambling. So the legislators are looking to legalize rubber ducky races. Your tax dollars at work, Wisconsin's.
It's definitely a law that need to be put in place. I mean, this is one of those things that that one day some crooked cop who knows the law, he'd be like, no, I'm going to bust this charity rubber duck race. Was it really like a threat of like a raid happening?
I hear actually that
according to the article, yeah. Or they just got a notice.
Yeah, I hear that there's actually a lot of problems with organized crime leaning on the rubber ducks to make sure the right one wins. So, but although in Wisconsin they technically call it unorganized crime, because those guys are never on time. They have no idea how to coordinate their clothing. It's kind of sad, really.
Oh, rubber ducks. I want to jump to the movie.
That same story, just before we move on to the movie, that same story also says that both Minnesota and Michigan have already made laws legalizing rubber ducky races. So this is not a problem limited just to Wisconsin.
I didn't know that there was a thing known as rubber duck races at all. I didn't know that was an event held by charities. I'd never seen or heard about that before. You know how often I go to charitable events.
I was about to say, you're not a charitable guy, so it's no surprise.
I usually steal the ducks.
So you wanted to talk about a movie, huh?
Yeah, a movie, huh?
So should we give the rundown?
Go for it, Jonathan. It's the Jonathan Show.
Hey. So this is
speech by now.
You're right. Yeah, this is where we just push play on one of the 40 previous episodes, but we've done this on. So the deal is we pick some of the worst movies on Netflix, usually a bad movie on Netflix, and then try to see how far into the movie we can get with absolutely no distractions, no second screens, no other people in the room with us, no alcohol, to really test our attention spans. And then we write down exactly how far into the movie we got before we ended up giving up. And at that point, we can invite as many distractions into our area as we want and either finish the film, or if we really want to, we can just call it quits and walk away. So this week, technically it was supposed to be last week, but we had to postpone. We did Dracula 3000, which was not a sequel to Dracula 2000.
Not only that, but when you finish the movie, Netflix suggests watching Dracula 3, which is just even stranger because there's a lot of these movies. Whose pick was this? This was Eric's pick, right?
This was me. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a pick for next week already. Well, actually, technically I have a choice, and I'll give you guys a choice, but let's talk about Dracula 3000.
How long did you go through this movie, Eric, before you either pulled a second screen, alcohol, or a second person?
30 minutes, and it was a second screen and alcohol.
Jonathan?
34 minutes, and I thought about getting alcohol too, and I can't even drink that stuff.
You are risking anaphylactic shock based on that. I made it all of 2 minutes and 38 seconds. It's kind of pathetic because if I recall the last movie, you made it exactly 0 seconds in, and the movie before that, it was like 17 seconds in. What is going on? Watching these movies on the bus, right? So what happened with that 238 was a little pop-up window showed up. If you don't count the pop-up window on the iPad, I watched it for about 20 minutes. I did finish the movie, but 20 minutes was my actual time. If you want to count the actual the full length of consecutive minutes watched, I watched an hour of it uninterrupted. So take that.
Well, in order for our brave viewers and listeners to understand what goes on with this movie, the synopsis is fairly simple, I guess. In a way, it's a reimagining of the classic Dracula story set aboard a science fiction setting, an actual spacecraft, with a lot of the superfluous details from the story lifted and then applied to the sci-fi setting. But there are a lot of changes to it too. So the hero, I guess, although he doesn't last through the whole movie, spoiler alert, is Captain Van Helsing.
You will be spoiling this movie 100%, because that's what we do on the show. We're not going to be like, oh, you didn't watch Dracula 3000. Oh, it's only been out for, 10 years and you still haven't watched it.
And
we're going to spoil
fair,
the hell out of this.
We should also point out that you can't really spoil the kind of movies we watch. They did it all on their own. So, Captain Van Helsing, he's the leader of a salvage ship called the Mother 3 that has 5 whole crew members aboard. And he's heard that a ship called the Demeter has been is in an area. It's been missing for 50 years, and he's heard kind of the general area where it could be found. Just a little bit of trivia. The Demeter is the name of the sailing vessel in the original Dracula story that Dracula boards to go from Europe up to England. So that's one Dracula connection. So you got the Van Helsing connection, the actual Dracula connection, although in this one he's Count Orlok, which is technically a Nosferatu connection, not a Dracula connection. Let's see what else. The ship leaves port at Varna in the original Dracula story, and in Dracula 3000, the captain of the Demeter is named Varna, so another, I guess, nod. To me, it was really odd that the references to the original Dracula story were, in many cases, fairly obscure. I mean, if you hadn't read it fairly recently, you might not remember them. And yet the general plot deviates wildly from the original story. So it was a very strange combination. It also is not very good. By the way, one of the actors in this movie is Coolio, and he plays the character of Coolio.
He plays 187.
Yeah.
Yes.
Might as well
1A7.
just be
Apparently
Tulia.
his Q before he went to college or something, and apparently started smoking everything under the sun, thereby making him kind of a burnout character. So some of the movies we've watched in the past have awful production values, awful scores, awful audio, awful everything. This movie I didn't think had that. It had some decent direction. You could follow the story. Audio was okay. Music wasn't horrible. So technically, from that standpoint, I thought it was okay.
The acting uh, acting went from mediocre to passable to like forgettable. The script was not so great. The you know it actually, depending as the movie went on, the acting actually got worse, and also the character decisions, like just within the logical world of this science fiction realm, didn't make a lot of sense. For example, when the salvage ship, the Mother 3, first encounters the Demeter, they send aboard a crew aboard to go to the Demeter to check it out before attaching the two ships so that they can tow it back to wherever they're going to scrap it. And the first person aboard the Demeter, which is a ship, they have no idea what could be aboard this ship. The first person aboard that is the navigator for the Mother 3. Why would you ever send a navigator aboard a strange vessel that you're trying to salvage instead of one of, I don't know, the two big dudes who could handle practically anything you throw at them?
They explained that. They said that she's a really bad navigator. They don't pay her any money because she's an intern. And so they're like, if we lose her, it's not that big a deal because she's really shitty at her job. So they did explain that, because in the beginning of the movie, by the way, first I'm going to complain about the inordinate amount of time that the credit sequence takes place.
Oh, it was so long. You didn't even finish it before you got a second screen up, because you said, what, 2 minutes?
2:38, because I was like, there's no way this is going to continue. It was like every freaking motion graphic like template you could think of, a lot of whooshing and okay, we got it. We're like in the bloodstream of something. It goes on for 3 minutes. 3 fucking minutes of just names, and then eventually it says Dracula 3000. And if I'm right, I don't believe the word Dracula is used at all in this damn movie.
No,
it's like used once or twice. Yeah, like
the vampire isn't Dracula. The vampire is Orlok, which, like I said, is actually the name of the vampire in the film Nosferatu, which is based off of Dracula. So this is weird because it's a movie called Dracula 3000, but the actual vampire in the movie is named after a character in another movie that itself is a ripoff of Dracula, which is, you're going down such a weird rabbit hole at this point. I don't know why they bothered to do it that way. Also, I don't know why Count Orlok in the year, what the hell years? It's, I guess, 3000, right? I don't know why Count Orlok in the year 3000 is wearing a Dracula costume from Party City.
Yeah, he's got one of those classic huge collars. So the casting of this movie, we've got Casper Van Dien as Van Helsing. You got Erica Laniak as, I forget her character's name, Aurora or something. There's
Aurora
Tiny Lister.
Ash.
If you've watched No Holds Barred, you know him as Zeus. Mm-hmm. He's also been in The Dark Knight as one of the prisoners. There's also Coolio, as you mentioned, who is, I think, delightfully stupid. And the thing that drives me nuts is they picked the least threatening looking actor ever to play the villain. He just kind of looks like, okay, so you're going to follow me, and we're going to do this thing, and we will take over the world. It's like, you're the big bad guy, and you're not even, it's not like this idea of, oh, maybe he's a misunderstood guy. He's just really, this is no pun intended, he's kind of wooden, like just really kind of dull. And have you guys seen him in any other movies?
No. You also forgot the professor.
The professor in the wheelchair.
Well, okay, yeah. All right. It's the year 3000, and we haven't fucking figured out how to give people who have problems with, like, whether they're quadriplegic or paraplegic or whatever, something besides a manual wheelchair. We can
especially
send them
on
to
a
fucking
spaceship.
outer space, but not put them in something beside, like a bodysuit or something.
Eric, you've been very quiet on the matter. What are your ideas of the
Well,
movie?
somewhere in the middle of that, I had to chase a dog away from a cat because they're attacking one another. But
This
so
movie,
I tried to I when I initially tried to watch it, I made it, how about 30 minutes in, and then I left it going. So I technically watched the entire thing, and then I realized I didn't remember any of it because I was pretty much bored the entire time. So I tried to watch it again, and I don't think I really captured much more. Like, with the exception of Coolio being obviously the best actor in the film, there really like it was pretty bad. Like, I mean, it wasn't horrible. Like as you said, like cinematography was okay, audio was fine, video was all right, acting was horrible, but
Mhm.
it was just boring. Like it was slow. It was slow
Yeah.
as hell. Like the first 30 minutes that I watched, nothing happened.
Yeah, no, it's ages before a vampire shows up. You keep getting the little updates from Captain Varna that had been previously recorded before he died. Two things about that I thought were a little weird.
And some of those
One, when they stumble,
weren't even understandable. Like there were a couple
right.
of them where I couldn't even understand what he was saying.
I had captions on the
Well,
whole time.
right. Two things
Uh,
about him though. One is that when they finally find his body, he has super long hair that goes all the way down his back. The skeleton has really long hair, and I'm like, how fucking long did this dude stay in this room? Because in all the videos that he did, his hair's short, right?
Yeah,
And
it's a nice
then
cut.
then you have the second thing was that um, he's clearly reading his lines. Like you
Oh,
can see his eyes
oh,
moving as he's
when I,
reading his lines.
when I first saw the very first video, I thought we were going to see some kind of hostage situation, perhaps, because he was kind of like, okay, I am now the captain on the ship, and these things have taken over. They are very bad. It just seemed like, okay, there'll be some kind of reveal, and there is none other than the fact he's tied himself to a chair and died. So yeah, I think Jonathan, I think you're right. I think he basically he might have locked himself down maybe a year too early because his hair is so long. He had a lot of time. I'm not really sure. Maybe he got up in between while locked down. What do
Yeah,
you think?
maybe he like wandered around with the chair actually still tied to him. He just like waddle on.
He just locked
Yeah.
himself once.
Also, just to go ahead and spoil the end of this movie, so Count Orlok, not Dracula, but Orlok, manages to turn or kill everyone aboard the ship with the exception of Tiny Lister's character Humvee and
Humvee.
Aurora Ash, the cyborg or the robot. Those are the only two that he doesn't manage to kill. They end up surviving, but then Aurora Ash reminds Humvee that she used to be a pleasure bot before she was an internal security robot. It turns out she's there to actually spy on the crew to make sure they're not breaking any laws. But she says, "Oh, I was a pleasure bot before." So he picks her up to carry her off so that he can have his manly way with her. And then I think the ship blows up.
Well, yeah, they're supposed to be taking the ship towards the sun because sunlight will kill the vampire. So in my head, I'm like, they're gonna go nearby so they can open up a window or shade, and that'll kill the guy. Apparently, did they decide to fly the ship into the Twin Suns, or did
yeah,
the ship blow up?
sorry, go ahead. I don't remember the ending because I think I
Now,
was probably asleep when it happened.
I'm I wasn't really entirely sure if it was their choice to essentially destroy the ship, or if that was something that the captain had worked on previously. Captain Varna, not Van Helsing. That Captain Varna had worked on previously that was finally actually paying off. I understand that the motivation was to prevent Dracula or Orlok from ever finding Earth. This whole movie is just a total mess. I remember while I was watching it, I was trying to figure out where the heck I had seen Aurora Ash before, and then I realized it was from Under Siege.
She's
She
also on
played.
Baywatch.
See,
She was Baywatch.
I never watched Baywatch, but I saw Under Siege.
That's
I
what I'm
remember her
saying.
jumping out of the cake.
Yeah, Erica Laniak aged quite well for the
Yeah.
movie.
Former
But just
Playboy model.
it was just generally like there is a decided lack of any action in this movie. But that at the very end of the film, where you mentioned that Ash explains that she was a pleasure bot. She's like, "Well, okay, well you're about to die, so I used to be a sex bot. How about we just do this?" He's like, "Okay, you don't ask me twice." Goes off with her. Oh, what the hell's the next scene? It's the captain Varna telling a little bit more, and then the ship blows up and the movie's over. And I wasn't expecting it to end as abruptly as it did because it seemed like, okay, they've got 12 hours left, but then the ship blows up. So did we skip over the 12 hours?
You know that there was a stinger scene at the end of the credits, right?
No, you're serious?
No.
Well, you can't.
What?
Yeah. It was just a gag, just a joke. Tiny Lister's holding up Elaniac over one shoulder, and then he slaps her on the ass, and she lets out a kind of chuckle, and that's the end. Just thought you should know. Also, then Agent Coulson shows up to get Humvee to join the Avengers.
Have Humvee take Hogan at no.
Yeah, exactly.
He shaves his into his head. Man.
Well, originally I was going to pick, because I was going to pick the next movie. Originally, I was going to pick Cheerleader Massacre 2 as the next movie we would watch, because my wife had singled that one out. But I actually did this before we skipped our last podcast recording. But I went ahead and watched it. And Iyaz, since you tend to watch these while you're commuting on a public mode of transportation, I've made a decision that we are not going to pick this one next, because there's no way you would be able to watch this and not be super self-conscious.
Yeah, I don't have a privacy screen yet. If I can get a privacy, not filter, but one of those, what the hell are they called? I guess there's a screen, but you just put it on top of your monitor. You can actually have privacy. If I had one of those, maybe I start watching this on the bus. But I'm really nervous. Freaking puck hogs, more nudity than strippers versus werewolves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll go ahead and tell you what you're missing with Cheerleader Massacre 2, because you need to know this.
And did you say you watched 1 and 2?
I watched 2 first, then I watched 1. So you have to actually. You have to follow the same train of events that I went through. I just, I had some time on my hands, so I watched some really bad movies. So Cheerleader Massacre 2, the first note I wrote was, this movie could be called Bitches and Boobs, the movie. And I said, here are the things I wrote. Like, unnecessary nudity? Check. And then I said, there's a super long shower scene in particular. Terrible CGI killer robots? Check.
What?
Oh, there are many killer robots in this movie. Bitchy cheerleaders? Check. Even worse, CGI blood? Check. Awful ADR where the audio and video don't remotely match up? Check. Bad makeup on creepy maintenance dude? Check. I said the worst thing about the film, in my opinion, is the cheesy acoustic guitar riff that accompanies any scene with gratuitous nudity. So as soon as you hear the guitar playing, you know that a scene where some cheerleader is going to be naked for a really long time is about to happen. I said the worst part about this is it conditioned me to get horny whenever I go to a dentist's office. But no, so here's the deal. Here's the way the movie opens. It's a group of cheerleaders, very typical, stereotypical movie style cheerleaders. So all of them got to be about 30 years old, but they're playing high school students. And they're on a bus, and the bus is going through the desert. And then suddenly the bus has a problem and has to pull off to the side. And the cheerleaders get out of the bus to stretch their legs and everything, when a flying robot suddenly zooms in and starts killing them. And when I say flying robot, just imagine a tricopter drone, okay? So it's kind of like a parrot drone, but it has 3 rotors instead of 4. But instead of rotors, they're table saw blades. And somehow these blades provide the lift this robot needs to fly around. There's also no visible means for this robot to actually sense anything in its environment. It essentially looks like a frame with 3 table saws on it that can magically zip through the air. So not only can it magically fly, it can also magically sense cheerleaders. And then it goes and starts sawing them in half and everything. Cut to this camp, cheerleader camp, where you find out that every year they hold some sort of cheerleading competition between two teams, which through the whole film they only refer to as red team and blue team. They never identify them as being from any particular school. So, but apparently these are like the two top cheerleading teams in wherever this movie is supposed to take place, and they compete at this camp that's remote from everything else until one of them gets picked for, to be the state champions or something, and they win scholarships. So the main character in it is like an ambitious, smart young girl who is using this as her opportunity to try and get into college. But meanwhile, all the other cheerleaders are pretty much those stereotypes. They're either oversexed and super bitchy, or they're incredibly ditzy. And then like all the cheerleader camp counselors are, women in their 30s who are supposed to be in their 20s or 30s, who are former cheerleaders. And they're exactly the same stereotypes, except they're, the counselors. And all of the women, pretty much, with a couple of exceptions, get extremely naked. So I knew there was no way Iyaz could watch this.
Wait. Can you define to me extremely naked? Because I know what naked is and I know what clothed is, but I'm not sure what extremely naked is.
So extremely naked. All right, naked would be where you have a scene where the camera shows a woman who's naked, and maybe it's on her for 5 to 10 seconds to establish that she's getting into a shower or getting out of a shower. Extremely naked is where it turns into a Skinamax softcore porno movie.
So I just loaded this up on Netflix and skipped ahead. Iyaz, there's no way you would want to watch this on the bus.
I told you.
Like I skipped ahead twice, and I've already seen like 3 naked women.
I'm usually up for dumb challenges, but it's an hour and a half on the bus, and it doesn't stop for about an hour. So like I get on that bus, I'm with the same people for 60 solid minutes. And
well, I could guarantee that you'd be making some new friends by watching these kind of movies.
It's only the same commuter crowd at 6:30 in the morning, so I'm sure it'd go over really well.
Yeah, but you know what? You don't generally like talking to people in public that much anyway, right? So this might be a good way to just, distance yourself. They'll give you your space if they know who you are.
Well, guys,
but they probably will throw me off the bus.
Guys, I haven't told you how this movie turns out. You have no idea what happens in this movie.
So wait,
please go on.
So since this is the sequel, how is it related to the first, and what's the story arc that's continuing?
I'll get to the first movie once I'm done with the second movie, because this is the order. This is the order I watched them in. So, but to answer your question, the two movies have nothing to do with each other except for the fact that you've got cheerleaders, nudity, and lots of death. Those are the 3 common factors between the 2 films. Other than that, no connection.
Yeah, well, I mean, come on, Hatchet 1, Hatchet 2, you got the same bad guy, but the continuity's not really there, considering he died in the first.
Right, except for the fact that Hatchet 2 literally picks up at the very end of Hatchet 1. So you could watch them back-to-back and make it one really long movie. It wouldn't make sense because the dude died, but somehow magically came back. But actually, he comes back at the very end of Hatchet 1 because he bursts out of the water and grabs the girl. What really doesn't make sense is the girl survives. That's the part that really doesn't make sense in Hatchet 2. Right. Also, the actress changes, so that would be really confusing too. Like if you were watching it as one long movie, you're like, why is she different now?
Just do a crossfade is all. Make sure when you combine them and you edit them, it's just kind of like you fade and you're like, oh, she looks a little different under the moonlight tonight.
Or she got so scared that a different actress had to play her. That's how scared the character got. It was amazing. Anyway, so in Cheerleader Massacre 2, you've got all these counselors and cheerleaders dying left and right. At the same time, you've got an ambitious television reporter, female, who shows up. She's covering the cheerleader thing as sort of like a personal interest kind of story. But once people start disappearing, she realizes there's the opportunity to make this a really big story, so she tries to cover that. And some of like her intern gets killed, male intern gets killed. There's a lot of misdirection thrown at this creepy looking maintenance dude, this old dude. And so for a while you get the feeling that it's supposed to be him who's the killer, except that the all the deaths that you actually see on screen involve robots, different style robots. Some of them, like they had the rotor flying one that I talked about. There's another one that's like a tiny little spider one that flies into people's mouths and it makes their head explode. There's one that can slice people in half. I mean, they're all these just these weird, impractical looking military robots. And it turns out that the ambitious girl, her best friend, has a father who works for the Department of Defense or works for a contractor that's making these kind of robots for the Department of Defense. But you don't really see what any connection is until the very end. Although, I mean, anyone paying attention would just be like, they'd figure it out before it ended. So all these people start dying, and at the very end of it, you find out that it's the ambitious girl's best friend, she's not a cheerleader, she's more like a tomboy. You know, they establish that by showing that she's changing her car's oil all on her own. So she's serious.
Obviously, come on, that's
yeah.
So
and it
hard.
Turns out that,
like,
but it turns out that
women
she's
can
the
do
killer.
that now.
Well, no, they
That's
can do it. We just don't allow them to do it.
Ah, good. Yeah.
No, anyway, my dog just kicked me for that. I think my dog doesn't like me being sexist.
It's okay. My dog's been chewing on my foot this entire conversation. He's not happy.
Yeah. Well, how it turns out is that the best friend, the female best friend, the tomboy character, is actually behind all the deaths, including her own father's. So she kills her dad and everybody else in the movie who dies with these robots. And it all turns out to be part of a master plan to inspire girls around the nation to rise up against the patriarchy. But her main point against the fact that, men are in charge and all this kind of stuff, her argument is that women like cheerleaders make it possible because they feed into that whole thing and they enable men to be these assholes. So in her mind, the best plan is to kill all the cheerleaders, and that will lead the way to real girl power. She dies at the end of the movie, but she's uploaded a message on YouTube or something, or through email list or something, which is essentially saying, stage 1 is complete. It's now time for stage 2. So the last bit of the movie, after she's dead, shows all these girls watching the video on television or on computers or on tablets or whatever, and putting on gloves and stuff and getting ready to go and blow up the world, Fight Club style or something. So it's absolutely ludicrous. I mean, the whole movie is ridiculous and totally not worth watching. So there's that. But then I went ahead and watched Cheerleader Massacre 1, which, like I said, has no connection. And I didn't even get all the way through this one. I actually had to stop because as much gratuitous nudity as in Cheerleader Massacre 2, it has nothing on Cheerleader Massacre 1, which has got crazy amounts of nudity, including a bathtub scene with 3 cheerleaders in it covering each other in chocolate sauce in a bath.
Well,
what else would you do it?
So I don't understand.
In the defense of the movie, it is absolutely integral to the plot.
Now, Jonathan, I have to.
The scary
ask,
thing is that could be completely true, considering these things are not exactly written with the idea of we're going to try to tell a story so much as like, can we get that girl to take her clothes off? I think we could. Yeah.
What was your question?
I do have to ask though, since you had that much time and you watched at least 3, maybe 3.5 hours worth of content, was your wife watching these with you?
No, she was not in the room with me. Because those are our rules, right?
Because I really want to hear her opinion.
But she's the one who picked them. I'll have. Oh,
that's right. She recommended them.
Yeah. So, but I told her afterwards. I was like, "Honey, I can't suggest these. There's way too much nudity for Iyaz to watch on public transportation." So, but I do have
Which is funny that is now a thing that we have to think about. Like,
that's a concern.
Can
when
I
the show
watch
moves
this?
to a Monday, that shouldn't be. Hopefully, I start watching the things on the weekend. I might start just carving out a time for it. So now we can go back to. Oh my God! If I try to watch Rock and Roll Frankenstein on the bus, I would. Oh, just the idea of that. Like,
I think at
people
the
probably
point where
check on me like, "Are you all right?" It's like, no, this is horrible.
I think the point where the 3 foot long green cock starts moving around on its own, you'd really be done with that.
Well, I remember when I stopped that movie. When we first watched it, it was when the priest had a giant crucifix stuck in his ass. That's when I was like, okay, I gotta stop watching this.
I'm curious. Oh no, that was one of the ones I watched that movie all the way through with no distractions. I remember that. That was one of the first ones that I got. I watched the whole thing because I was so horrified I couldn't look away.
Yeah, that was when we were like, that's well before I started going about all of 25 seconds into these movies, because I was just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna get a second screen because this is just terrible.
Well, I have a choice for you for the next movie. Okay, there are two different movies, both of which, by the way, both of these Netflix suggests that I would actually like, because I thought it would be fun to pick it's still, both of these are still probably super cheesy, schlocky movies, but they sound like either one of them could be potentially entertaining in its own cheesy, schlocky way, as opposed to just a chore to get through because it's just so poorly made. One of them I actually have already seen, and a review for that movie on Red Letter Media, which they do great reviews. And it was part of a show they do called Best of the Worst. But it was also one that was recommended for me on Netflix. So, okay, here are your two choices just in general terms. I'm not going to give you the titles of the movies. You guys just have to tell me which one of these two sounds the most interesting.
Oh, man.
Should we watch the super schlocky 1980s action movie that is inept and bizarre and kind of a weird tonal mix of let's all work together and everything can be happy and lots of blood? Or should we watch the apeshit crazy Japanese? I don't know if it's. I assume it's Japanese science fiction film. So apeshit Japanese science fiction film or schlocky 1980s kung fu action movie.
Are they both in English?
I don't think that the Japanese one is, but I haven't really started it.
I mean, it could be dubbed, is why I even said that.
I don't know if it's dubbed or if it's subtitled. I haven't tried to.
Also, Iyaz, you said you watch them with subtitles on anyway.
I do, because sometimes I don't know what the hell's going on, but I don't know if I'll be able to read on the bus. I've occasionally been developing motion sickness, brand new for this year, and this model Iyaz. I'm very fucking happy about that because I never had that problem before. I would vote for the one without the subtitles right now. So based on that alone, how about you, Eric?
80s schlocky movie sounds pretty good to me, honestly.
All right.
You didn't really sell the Kung Fu one, Jonathan.
Well, there's another one.
Apeshit Jap. Well, here, tell you what. Let me read to you. I'll read to you the two descriptions for the movies based on the because that's really the only way to be fair, right? So here's the one for the 1980s movie. A martial arts rock band meets out crime-crushing justice to the motorcycle ninjas who have seized control of Florida's narcotics trade. So that's the 1980s movie.
Sounds great so far.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome synopsis, right? Okay, now hang on. Let me get the other one because I have to actually. Yeah, there we go. Let's see. The other one. Here's the synopsis. Superhero Daiman, who rides a robotic motorcycle that knows karate, is called upon to battle the Syndicate Sigma, led by the evil Dr. Akunomiya and his sidekick, gorgeous cyborg Miss Borg. The film is based on a popular 1970s Japanese TV series.
That's also
okay. So I've changed my mind, I guess.
I would also like to watch this motorcycle that knows kung fu.
All right, because I'm going to go ahead and watch both of them. So I But okay, so that movie, the Japanese one is Karate Robo Zaborgar, Zaborgar.
You
So
said right,
that's
karate. It's the third one. Netflix. Oh
Karate,
my
yeah,
gosh.
Karate Robo
It's
Oh,
best
it
guess
Zaborgar.
looks
for like
like
three stars.
Power
Average
Ranger.
2.9.
I
It
got
gives
three and
me
a half on that. 3.6. Yeah.
3.7, 3.7 for me. Now the
So
other
we're
film,
actually gonna like this movie.
that's what I said. That's what I said.
The
So
other one.
Okay.
the other movie, by the way, was Miami Connection. So if you really feel ambitious, you could try and tackle both of these movies because I am determined to watch both of them.
I also have a 3.6 on that.
Average is 3.6. And
I
the best
know.
guess for me
I
is
am
3.3. This
the
just
average.
looks. They go recommended based on your interest in the FP and that movie. We just added Karate Robo.
That's exactly what I got because I just added it. Damn you, Netflix.
Yep.
This movie makes The Godfather look like a second-rate community college dinner theater production. You must watch this film. That's what we
See?
gotta base it on next time. If we have choices, I want it on like on reviews because
Well,
that's about Family Connection.
I'm rating that review helpful right now. Like, I don't even care.
Yeah, see, I think we're gonna have to watch both of these at some point, even if you guys
I
can only watch
may
one.
actually.
So, the best of the worst, by the way, have you guys ever watched that show?
No.
I have. I think
Okay.
I think they follow us on Twitter.
What? Best of the worst? The Red Letter Media guys do? What the hell are they doing? Okay,
I don't know. There
so
was somebody else who did a bad movie podcast, and they followed us on Twitter.
well, Red Letter Media, those guys are great. They do some really funny stuff. Those are the guys who do the Pinkerton Star Wars reviews, the ones with the crazy sociopath
Oh
who's
yeah.
same group of people. So the best of the worst, the concept of this show is that this group of friends gets together and they watch three bargain bin movies. They'll watch them back to back, and then what they'll do is they critique each movie. They'll take some time to talk about what the movie's premise is and the things that were amusing about it or the stuff that didn't work, and then they move on to the next one. And after they've done this with all three movies, they sit around as a group and vote on which movie is the best of the worst. Which one did they find the most entertaining? And then they vote on which one they thought was the absolute worst. And whichever one gets the votes for the absolute worst is then destroyed in some dramatic fashion on the show. So this was one of Miami Connection was one of the movies featured in one of the episodes. And just based upon that review, I was like, I already had it in my queue. I hadn't seen the best, the worst before I added it to my queue. But once I saw the review, I knew I had to see this movie. It looks like it's it's motorcycle ninjas and a rock and roll karate band. It reminded me a little bit of the basic premise of Buckaroo Banzai, which if you ever try to explain that to someone who has never seen it, just sounds like the most bizarro movie of all time.
I have not seen that.
You haven't seen Buckaroo Banzai?
But now I am trying to find it.
Okay, so Buckaroo Banzai was a movie made in the 80s, and it has some great performances. John Lithgow as the bad guy is phenomenal. But it's a really weird premise. The basic idea is that Buckaroo Banzai is this guy who's half Asian. He's a neurosurgeon, a rocket scientist, and a rock and roll legend. And he leads a group called...
Quick interruption. Amazon Prime, I believe it is free.
Good. But yeah, his group is called the Hong Kong Cavaliers. It's a super cheesy movie. It's actually a little difficult to follow because the pacing is weird and so they're like long sections where you're just waiting for something else to happen. But it's really entertaining. Particularly Lithgow's performance is phenomenal.
So this I have to see. I think it's been on one of my lists for a long time because I think several people, I think at least three people, keep lists of movies that I have to watch because they are always appalled by the fact I haven't. You haven't seen this? I'm like, fine. Look, if you're really that upset about it, keep a list, and I will tell you when I watch the damn movie. Share it as a doc, and I will talk to you about it because otherwise it's just a consistent discussion of you haven't seen. Used to be Wizard of Oz, so then I watched
I
it.
like this way of interacting with your friends. Listen, make a Google Doc spreadsheet. Add the things that I need to watch to that spreadsheet, and as I watch them, I will update you.
Yes, and if they don't, they can just. It's basically it's a giant shut the fuck up about the movies, because if they're not willing to do the work, I don't have to worry about it anymore. So, all right, good. You're not going to do it, then I don't have to watch a damn movie.
Well,
Friendly,
this just reminds me. This just reminds me that I'm older than you two because Buckaroo Banzai was one of those movies I saw as a kid that I absolutely loved. I even have somewhere I've got a piece of memorabilia that way back in the '80s, when science fiction and fantasy films were coming out, one of the things they would do is put out tons of promotional giveaways that they would distribute to science fiction conventions because science fiction and fantasy was certainly nowhere close to mainstream back in those days. And so in order to try and convince people to come out and see movies, they'd give away all this stuff. And I remember there was a science fiction convention I went to in the mid 80s in Atlanta called Fantasy Fair. And there they had some representatives from the Buckaroo Banzai movie, and they handed out these Buckaroo Banzai headband things. They're actually, you would tie them in the back. They weren't, it wasn't a circle or anything. You would actually tie them. And they're really nice, high quality giveaways. And I still have mine. It says Team Banzai on it. And actually, you see Buckaroo put one of those on in the film. So it's one of those things where it's just like I have a lot of fond memories about this movie because I loved it as a kid. I had the stuff that the film gave away for promotional purposes. I saw it in a theater with a bunch of other science fiction geeks. So that made it a lot of fun too, because it was one of those community experiences where you're in the right kind of audience. I mean, I know probably, I assume Iyaz feels this way, and Eric, you might as well. But there are times where I feel like going to see a movie in the theater is way more hassle than what it's worth, because I just don't enjoy seeing. I don't like going to a movie theater where people are a bad audience, and I get that frequently enough where it discourages me from going. But every now and then you go to a movie where you see it with a great audience, and it makes the experience even more enjoyable. And that's kind of how that movie was for me.
Yeah, I have a tendency to avoid theaters unless there's a great benefit to seeing on such a large screen, or if the audio is going to be a real experience that is important. But if it's like a talking head movie, it's not something I need to like run out and go see in a theater. Obviously, like I'll probably go for things like the Marvel movies because I like to see them gigantic. But yeah, going to theaters is rough for me.
I'll tell you
I mean, there's
Eric.
I mean, there's like an indie theater like a couple blocks away from me that like, they'll show like mainstream movies every now and then, but like that's a place I know I love going because I know the audience is always going to be great. If I go to like the big huge cinema, I never know what to expect and who's going to be there.
Yeah,
But
I
if I go
totally
to that tiny ass theater that plays, one or two movies a week, like I always know it's going to be great. So
I totally understand. We've got a couple of those theaters, those style theaters here in Atlanta as well. There's one called the Plaza Theater, which isn't too far from where I live, and they tend to show. Not only do they show like the smaller independent films as they come out, but they'll also show older movies that kind of have a cult following, and those are always fun to go see in a group as well. And the movies I've enjoyed the most there were whenever Edgar Wright, Simon Pegg, and Nick Frost made a movie. So like Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, and they didn't do The World's End. They didn't do a screening here in Atlanta for that, but they would do these road tours where they would screen the film in advance in certain cities, and they would even do a little question and answer at the end of the movies. And we saw Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz that way. and I mean, you couldn't ask for a better audience because it was all the diehard fans of Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg and Nick Frost who were all coming to this thing. So everyone was totally keyed in, ready to have a good time. And it just made the whole experience much more enjoyable. And that's really, to me, that's the sad thing about going to see a movie in just a giant, like, theater where it's just a bunch of people, half of whom couldn't give a shit what was on the screen. That is a very frustrating experience. It's like this weekend I went and saw the Lego movie. And man, there are all these fucking kids.
Damn it. I saw American
I want to see that. I heard it's
Hustle
really,
instead
really
of
good.
the Lego movie, and I need to go see the Lego movie. Yeah.
What did you see instead?
I saw American Hustle. I hadn't seen it yet.
Okay, I haven't seen him. What did you enjoy it?
I did. It was really funny because I was talking to somebody, and they were like, "Yeah, one of my friends said it was just like so boring they walked out," and I'm like, "That's because it has character development. Like it's long, but it's pretty good, honestly. Like it takes a while to get around to character development, but there's a reason it won awards. Like I enjoyed it, but don't pay $12 or $13 at your local movie theater to see it. Just wait.
Go to a foreign one, somewhere far away
Yeah.
from you. That's Eric's advice. That'll make it much better.
Go
ones,
go pay
that's silly.
$13 30 or 40 miles away.
Well, I'll say this. When I saw the Lego movie, I saw it after all my friends had been raving about it online. They were all really crazy about it. So I went and saw it, and I enjoyed it. But I think by the time I had seen it, based upon all the stuff that my friends were already saying, there was just I had higher expectations than what was delivered. Not that it was bad. It was not bad. It was an entertaining film. I just don't know that it was as entertaining as some of the response has suggested. For me, it was a little muddled. It kind of irritated me how so much is going on the screen at once that it's distracting. Like to me, it suffered from some of the same problems I had with the Transformers movie, where you just like, let's have more sharp angles all twisting and turning on screen at once, and that will denote action. Except in this case, instead of sharp angles, it's Lego bricks. So, but I mean, it was still a lot of fun. It was just like in any of the chase sequences where stuff was flying everywhere, I was having trouble following it. To be fair, I also was recovering from Lasik eye surgery. It was 2 days after I'd had it done. So that might have also had something to do with it.
And now you can see without glasses. How does that feel? Do you still find yourself? I know when I wore contacts for a very short time, I was constantly still turning my head to look at things because I'm so used to wearing glasses. Are you doing that?
I haven't done that, but there are two things that I have noticed I do occasionally. Like one is that I will occasionally reach up to remove glasses that I'm not wearing because I'm used to when I'm reading something.
To focus.
I'm used to when I'm reading something close, I'm not able to see it when I'm wearing my glasses, but now I can see whether it's close or far away. It's just that habit that I've built in. And the other one is when I wake up first thing in the morning, I look to my nightstand to grab my glasses to put them on so I can see. And then I realize, one, my glasses aren't there. And two, I can see without them. So,
wait, so
yeah.
What was your vision? Because I still have glasses, but what was
it wasn't
your vision
bad.
before?
It wasn't bad. It was like minus 2.5 in each eye. So it wasn't,
Oh, it's not bad.
Yeah, mildly nearsighted was really what I was.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be able to ditch the glasses and not have to worry about contacts. So, I underwent the procedure and it went smoothly. But I got to tell you, not the most comfortable procedure I've ever had.
What was the discomfort? I mean, obviously they're cutting up your corneas. Is that what they're doing, or what?
That was a big part of it. Okay, so let me walk you through how it worked. So after I come in and they've done the initial exam to make sure that my eye had not changed dramatically since I had the preliminary full examination, which had happened months earlier, they offered me a Valium, which I took because what I wanted to be able to do was fall asleep as soon as I could after the procedure to let my eyes heal, because I knew that the first couple of hours after surgery tend to be the roughest. So took the Valium. Once they were ready to go, they took me into the room. where there's a table that looks kind of like a massage table in a way. It's got like the little hole in the pillow for the back of your head to go into to kind of hold it steady. So I lay down on that, got my head there. There's a machine that then moves over in front of me. That's where the actual laser is. Then they had already put in drops for to anesthetize my eyes. They then put in they taped my eyelids open. So they put tape on the bottom and top eyelids and taped them to my face. Then they used a little like a little hand tool that stabilized my eye. It kind of looked like that thing from Clockwork Orange that keeps Alex's eyes open. I mean, it was metal and it went on either end of my eye and held it in place. Then they put something on top of my eye, and this it was so close I couldn't make out what the hell it was. But it was the part that actually it put pressure on my eye. So it's pushing against my eye, and then a blade cuts your cornea and your vision in that eye goes away. Now my other eye is already covered, so I am blind at this point. And then after a few moments, I could sort of see a weird light straight ahead. And they tell me to just keep looking straight. So I do my best to look straight, although it's really hard because the laser itself is a green light, but I couldn't see green for a while. Then finally I see the green. I concentrate on the green. It does this zapping noise. I smell my eyeball cooking, which was a little weird. And then at the end of all that, the laser's turned off, and they use these little tools that look kind of like dental picks to replace your corneal flap in place. So as that's happening, your vision is clearing up, and you actually see they look like needles coming at your eye to move the cornea flap back in place. And they're fiddling with it to make sure it's exactly where it needs to be, so it'll heal perfectly and it won't have any wrinkles in it or anything. Then they do the same thing to your other eye. So you get to relive that experience, except this time you actually know what's coming, which in a way is worse.
Oh God. Okay. I've always thought about doing it for myself, and I think mine is 2.25 and one is 2.5.
No.
Yeah.
You should pay
about the same as you. But the idea of just having, I was getting my eyes checked a while ago, and they were like, "Okay, we're gonna have this blue light. It's coming. Okay, just keep your eye open. And I was blinking because I couldn't stop it because you want to touch my eyeball. I am trained to not let that happen.
Yeah.
I mean, how the hell did you keep your eye open? They just kept,
like I said, my eyelids were taped open. They taped my bottom eyelid to my cheek and my top eyelid to my forehead, and then they had the secondary device which kept the eye as open as possible and as still as possible. And then they put this other thing on top of it to cut the flap. They actually have a different method where they can cut the flap using a laser rather than a scalpel, essentially is what it is. But I ended up using the scalpel, and it was, like I said, it was not a comfortable experience. The whole thing didn't take that long. We're talking like a couple of minutes total per eye. And then once it was over, they gave me a pair of giant sunglasses, which were not just to help with the light sensitivity, but also to minimize any chance of anything flying into my eye. Because I'm not supposed to rub my eyes for like 6 more days, because that corneal flap has to we have to let it heal in place, or else I could damage my vision or potentially even blind myself. So that's exciting.
You got loose corneal flaps.
And I have all these different eye drops that I have to put in, 2 different types of eye drops that I have to put in 4 times a day, plus artificial tears to keep my eyes lubricated, because you don't make as many natural tears for a while after you've had the surgery, so your eyes can really dry out. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, like I said, it was not comfortable, but it was a pretty simple procedure. All things considered, and I can see without glasses now, so that's pretty awesome.
I think we should take a look into the future.
Okay.
Next week on Podcast Without Pretense.
I'm blind!
I thought, when Jonathan explained the whole eye thing, I figured I could do it myself. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, I'm not going for the vision thing. I'll stay with the contacts. It seems like it's working better.